What's up everyone? In this video I'm going to talk about the Nikon D40X. And in this video I'm just going to talk about why it's still a pretty good camera to use, and I think why you should get one, especially if you're on a budget. So the Nikon D40X was released just 4 months after the announcement or the release of the Nikon D40. The Nikon D40 was announced in November of 2006, and 4 months later, on March 2007, the D40X was announced, which was strange, but this was back in the day of the megapixel race. The Nikon D40 had 6 megapixels and the D40X has 10 megapixels, which is a huge jump back when it was released. Brand new, this camera was $800. Now you can find one for about well under $100, probably even under $80, depending on the condition it's in. I bought mine at my local camera store for $50, and that was just a body alone, no lenses, just a body, the battery, and the battery charger. So just going to the specs of the Nikon D40X, it has a 10 megapixel CCD sensor. It is a crop sensor. The ISO ranges from 100 to 1600 with a boost up to 3200. This is where the difference is with the D40X to the D40. With the D40, the base ISO is ISO 200. With the D40X, it's at ISO 100. But it's still the same range. You can go from 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, and then a boost higher than that. It only has 3 autofocus points. It can shoot up to 3 FPS. It has a 2.5-inch LCD screen. It has 1 SD memory card slot. It has no Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi, and no video. So just talking about the pros about this camera, one of the great things I do like about the D40X is how cheap you can find these now, depending on the condition it's in. Mine is actually in okay shape. As you can see here, overall I think it's in pretty good condition for what it is. And depending on the condition it's in, these can vary in price. I think one of the most expensive ones I've seen is probably $250, but that included like the 18 to 55 lens, the 55 to 200, and other accessories. And that's the most I've seen them priced for locally. I think it just really depends on how well these have been taken care of. But personally, I think anything over $150 is pretty high, is a pretty high price to pay for the Nikon D40X, especially if it just comes with one lens like the 18 to 55 and a memory card, and that's it. I think if you are trying to buy one that's used, buy one. If you're a new photographer, buy one that has the 18 to 55 and the 55 to 200 and a battery charger and possibly a more accessories like a filter or a memory card, something like that, and locally. That way you can just check it out and see if it's in good working condition, because these are older cameras, and I would highly recommend you to take a look at them in person and see how it feels in your hands and how it's functioning. So just be aware that if you are looking for buying it used, buy it locally. Another website I would trust, if you can find it, is probably just what is it? It is Adorama, B&H, and KEH. Those are the 3 websites that I would recommend to look at, because they're pretty accurate for their details, and their used equipment is pretty accurate. Another pro about this camera too is a high ISO grain. I do like how the high ISO looks like here. For example, it just gives that authentic, well, not authentic, but that grain, digital grain film look. So anything above, I would say 800. So if you're like at ISO 1600 and above, that grain is going to be there. It will affect your image quality, but you also get that really film grain look to it. I don't know what it is with what Nikon did with the CCD sensors, but I love that film grain from this camera. Another pro is also the amazing colors you can get from the D40. It's one of the things I first noticed when I used the D40X was the amazing colors. Similar to the Nikon D40, the D40X is a CCD sensor, so it's going to give you that really awesome colorful image. So D40X owners, comment below, let me know what you think about the colors from this camera. And another great thing too is that it's really easy and simple to use. The Nikon D40 and the D40X are pretty similar in terms of user interface, and the D40 was my first camera I used, and I learned all the professional settings from it. Well, not professional, but I learned the manual mode, aperture mode, shutter mode, and priority mode from the Nikon D40. So it is a very capable camera to learn with, and if you are a beginner, learn with it. grow with it, because that's what I started out with, the D40, then moved on to the D90, then moved on to the D700 and D750 and so on after that. So on to the cons about the Nikon D40X. I think one of the things that I didn't like about the D40X back then and now is that it does not have a autofocus screw, so you're really limited on lenses that you can use. Another con is there's no top panel to see what your settings are. Also, the autofocus is definitely not made for sports or fast action, so if you're planning to do sports photography or a wildlife that's really fast or just event photography, I wouldn't rely on this camera, and we're going to talk to that more about what this camera is for later in this video too. And the next con would just be the high ISO grain. Above 1600 you will see that grain. I know some people may like it, but it also really depends on how much light you're working with and what your settings are. There are no best settings for this camera because it just really varies on how much light you're working with, what lens you're using, and other factors such as other lights and many other things that really vary depending on the type of photography you're doing. Another con could just be the beginner user interface. This camera does not have a guide mode like the Nikon D3000 series cameras do, so you will have to force your way to learn it, or you can just view the manual like what I did. I just looked at the manual online and just learned that way. And another con for this camera too is that there is no video, no Bluetooth, and no Wi-Fi built in. This camera was made in 2007, and back then having those three features would have been amazing, but I don't think Nikon was thinking that far ahead. But no video, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, this camera will not do any video recording. So this camera gets compared to the Nikon D60 a lot, but the D60 is a better camera in terms of features and specs. But between these two, they're pretty similar in terms of image quality. But the D60, as I said earlier, does have better features compared to the Nikon D40X. So what's the difference between these two cameras, the D40X and the D60? As you can see this chart here, the D40X was released in March of 2007, whereas literally in 7 months, the D60 was released in January of 2008. Both of them have 10 megapixels, and the image processor, the D40X was similar to the D8 and the D200, whereas the D60 was more similar to the D300. So the D60's image processor was better, or is better, than the D40X. Both of them have 3 autofocus points, and the ISO ranges from 100 to 1600 on both cameras. Both of them do not do any video recording. The D60 does stop motion, but it's not video. It just does stop motion. The D40 does not have that feature. And both of them shoot at 3 FPS. So if you did have the choice between the D40X and the D60, it depends which one comes first and which one's the better deal that works in your budget. Personally, I would still choose the D40X over the D60 just because I'm a huge D40 and D40X fan. But really, you can't go wrong with both because they're both fantastic beginner cameras for you to play around with, or for someone that just wants to get more serious with photography. So let's talk about the Nikon D40X's image quality. It was actually a lot better than I thought it would be. Comparing the D40 and the D40X images on social media, it's going to be near impossible to tell. But when I'm using both, I can tell the extra 4 megapixels from the D40X is just a little better. And that's what kind of surprised me too. When I put a decent lens on it, the image quality from it was actually pretty good. But that goes for any camera that you have. You've put a quality lens on it like a 35 1.8 GDX or a 50 1.8, you're gonna see your image quality improve compared to say your 18 to 55 or the 55 to 200 lens. Personally, I like using the Tamron 45 1.8 on my Nikon D40X, but if you're on a budget, the Nikon 35 1.8 GDX and the 50 1.8G lenses are great. Those are two lenses I would highly recommend if you're looking to improve your image quality, and you can find both of these, well, each of these for well under $100 each. I bought the 35 1.8 GDX for I think $90, and then the 50 1.8G for about $100 shipped through Amazon. And I'll have links below on where you can purchase these as well. As for ISO performance, this really depends on how much light you're using. If you're near some ambient light or just natural light, ISO 800, for example, as you can see here, isn't too bad. I was kind of more surprised, but this also really depends on your settings too. I think at ISO 800, it's pretty good. It's not super grainy, but it's definitely usable, especially if you know what your settings are. As you can see here with these images that I took at an indoors location where there was a good amount of light, but it was still pretty low light because I was still at ISO 800. But for sure, once you get over an ISO 1600, you will see that grain. But for the D40 and D40X users, you let me know what lens you love to use on your camera. So what would I use the Nikon D40X for? I know I'll get this question a lot, so I would not use the D40X for fast action photography or for wedding events or any family events where you really need to capture those moments or those shots. Especially if you need a really fast focusing camera with very accurate autofocus, this D40 is not the camera to get. I would highly recommend getting another camera like the D300 or the D5 or the D7000 cameras if you're looking for a faster, more accurate sports action camera. Since the Nikon D40X isn't really a fast action sports photography camera, it shines in landscapes, portraits, and everyday use. It's gonna be a camera for hobbyists because it's one camera that doesn't have a lot of features, but you can really enjoy using it, and it's one of the reasons why I love using this camera. This camera slows you down when you're on the go. In the world of just spraying and praying photography where you're letting the camera do all the work, the Nikon D40 forces you to slow down and really compose your shots. The D40X doesn't have features like face and eye autofocus detection, IBIS, in-body image stabilization, focus peaking, subject recognition, and other fancy mirrorless features. It doesn't even have video recording capabilities. As I said earlier, every time I use this camera, I have to think about the shots I want. Because I feel like when I use my Nikon Z50 or the Z6, it's like I can just take a picture and it's more forgiving. With the Nikon D40X, it is not forgiving because you're gonna have to plan your shoot ahead of time and kind of think of how you're going to compose that shot and what's going to happen around you. I think it's one of the reasons why the D40X is going to be great for hobbyists. You're not relying on the camera's technological features. It's just going to be focusing on what you want to capture. And the camera does really excel in bright days, but in lower light situations, the autofocus will fight you and you will miss some photos in low light situations. It's one of the reasons why I would not suggest this camera for fast moving subjects or taking photos in low light situations. You're definitely gonna miss some shots in low light situations just because this camera's autofocus system is just not on par with today's cameras. But you can still use it, just make sure you plan ahead and make sure you want to get the shots you want. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is possible to get shots you want, but not the shots you really need. And I think one of the cool things about this camera is that you have access to a wide range of lenses, especially from other brands like Sigma, Tamron, Tokina. As long as those lenses say it's a Nikon F mount, you can use it on the Nikon D40X. But just be aware that some of these older lenses, like the Nikon AFD lenses, will not autofocus on the D40X because it does not have a autofocus screw on the mount like this, like how the Nikon D7000 or the D80 has this autofocus screw here. The Nikon D40X does not have the autofocus screw. So if you do have like the older Nikon AFD lenses, you will not be able to autofocus those lenses on the Nikon D40X. You can use them, but you just won't be able to utilize the autofocus. So is the Nikon D40X still a relevant camera today? I think it still is, especially if you're on a budget. I bought mine for $50 at my local camera store and it had about 28,000 shutters on it and it's still in pretty decent shape too. And I think this camera is still a really good camera to collect, and if you're a hobbyist, definitely put it in one of your collections just because it's such a cheap camera, and if it's working, even better because you can bring it with you if you don't want to bring your other fancy cameras. The image quality from it can definitely obliterate most, or I would say not even most, all phone cameras right now. If you want to challenge me on that one, let me know in the comments, because I think the sensor from this camera just gives you amazing image quality and the colors too. You know, while it lacks in video quality because it does not do any video, it definitely shines in the photography area. And I think many Nikon D40 and D40X users will praise how good the colors are from this camera. So if you have or have had this camera, please leave a comment below because I would love to hear your experience with the Nikon D40X. And if you found this video helpful, I would really appreciate it if you share, like and subscribe to my channel, because that really does help my channel grow. This review is probably gonna be good for like another 2, 3, 5 more years until this camera breaks on me. So if you have any questions about it, leave a comment below and I'll try my best to help. Thanks for watching, everyone. See ya.